The last hope Zora stood alone in the middle of the deserted village square, her body trembling from both the cold and hunger. The streets around her were silent, almost too quiet. The gray sky above her matched the dull, lifeless feeling in her chest. Her world, once full of laughter and hope, now felt empty. She glanced down at her younger sister, Ilara, who lay in a small, cold shack they called home. Ilara's pale face was barely visible beneath the thin blanket Zora had managed to find. Her breathing was slow and shallow, each breath a struggle. Zora had never seen her sister this weak before. The fever had taken hold of Ilara, and with every passing hour, Zora felt her world getting smaller, more hopeless. Zora looked down at her hands, cracked and worn from days of work. She had nothing left, no food, no hope, nothing. Their planet, Lycos, was dying. The soil no longer grew crops, the waters had dried up, and the air was growing thick and toxic. The traders who once brought food and supplies to the villages had stopped coming months ago. And now Zora was running out of options. The only thing she had left to offer was the crystal, a treasure passed down through generations of her people. It was a symbol of their history, their strength. It shimmered softly in the dim light, its deep blue glow a reminder of the past. But even with this, Zora knew it might not be enough. It was her last hope. She had heard rumors that the traders were in the village square. Maybe, just maybe, they would help her. If she could get the traders to give her food, even just a small meal for Ilara, it might be enough to keep her alive. Zora knew that if she failed, there would be no more chances, no more hope. She had no other family, no other way to survive. With a heavy heart, Zora turned toward the village square, the crystal still clutched tightly in her hand. Her footsteps echoed in the empty streets, each step feeling heavier than the last. As she walked, her mind raced. What could she offer? What would they want in return? She had nothing. The crystal, while precious, was the only thing of value she owned. Would it be enough? As Zora neared the square, she saw a few traders gathered near a large metal cart, unloading crates of food. The smell of fresh fruits and meats filled the air, and her stomach growled loudly in protest. She hadn't eaten in days. Ilara hadn't eaten at all. Zora approached cautiously, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew how the traders looked at people like her, alien, weak, desperate. They saw her kind as nothing more than a means to an end. She had seen it before, the way they bargained for the lives of others, treating them like objects, not people. Taking a deep breath, Zora walked up to the nearest trader, a burly alien, with 4 arms and a stern face. His eyes flicked over her, his expression unreadable. "Please," Zora whispered, holding out the crystal. "My sister is sick and I have no food left. I'll trade this for some food, just enough to save her." The trader looked at her, then down at the crystal, his face unchanged. He wasn't impressed by the crystal, but there was something in his eyes, something calculating. "Your people's treasures," he said in a deep voice, "mean nothing to me, but for the right price I might be able to help you." Zora's heart skipped a beat. This was it. She had no other choice. "Please," she begged, "just food for my sister. She's dying. I don't have anything else." The trader tilted his head, considering her words. Then, with a sharp motion, he gestured to the food on the cart. There were fruits, meats, glowing liquids that Zora had never seen before. It was all too much. Too much for someone like her to even dream of. "I'll give you food," the trader said slowly. "But not just for that crystal. I want something more." Zora's breath caught in her throat. "What more could I offer?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Please, I just want to save her." The trader leaned closer, his voice dropping to a low growl. "You'll work for me," he said. "When your sister is healthy, you'll do whatever I need. It's the only way I'll give you the food you need." Zora's heart sank. She had never wanted to serve anyone, never wanted to be at the mercy of a stranger. But the thought of losing Ilara, of having no way to save her, was worse than any deal. "I'll do it," she said softly. "Just save her." The trader smiled, a cruel, cold smile that made Zora shiver. He took the crystal from her and placed it on the table next to the food. "Good," he said. "You've made the right choice." Zora took the bundle of food, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. She turned and hurried back to the shack, her mind racing. She had saved her sister for now, but at what cost? What kind of work would the traitor make her do? And what kind of man had she just trusted? As Zora entered the shack, she knelt beside Ilara, placing the food in her lap. Her sister's eyes fluttered open and she smiled weakly, reaching for the meal. Zora held her close, tears threatening to spill over. Zora had saved her sister's life, but she had no idea what the future held. One thing was certain, everything had changed, and now Zora's fight for survival was just beginning. The next morning the sun rose behind the jagged hills, casting an orange glow over the dying world of Lycos. Zora barely noticed the beauty of the sky as she sat beside Ilara, watching her sister sleep, her face pale from exhaustion and fever. The food Zora had managed to get the day before lay untouched on the small table beside them. She didn't want to waste a single bite, but Ilara wasn't ready to eat yet. Zora's mind was clouded with 1,000 thoughts, but none of them could help her in the moment. She had made the trade. She had promised to work for the traitor, but now the gravity of that decision weighed heavily on her. Zora knew the traitor's words weren't just idle threats. She had no idea what kind of work he would demand from her, or what kind of man he really was. The cold, calculating look in his eyes made her shudder. He was no friend, no savior. He was a businessman, and he had bargained with her life. Her heart sank at the thought, but she couldn't change the deal now. Zora glanced at Ilara again. Her sister was starting to stir. Her breathing was still labored, but she was alive. Her color slowly returning to her cheeks. A small relief, a glimmer of hope. Zora's heart swelled with love for her sister, and for the first time in days, she allowed herself to smile. She had done the right thing, at least for now. As Ilara slowly opened her eyes, Zora spoke softly. "How are you feeling?" Ilara blinked, her eyes clouded with confusion before focusing on Zora. I feel better," she whispered, her voice weak. She reached out for the food beside her, but Zora stopped her. "No, Ilara," Zora said, gently holding her sister's hand. "Rest first. You need to gain your strength." Ilara nodded slowly, her eyes fluttering shut once again. Zora knew her sister would need time to recover, time she didn't know if they had. Zora stood up, looking out the small window of their shack, her thoughts drifting back to the traitor. His dark smile haunted her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she had made a terrible mistake. She hadn't just traded a crystal. She had traded her freedom, her dignity, and maybe even her soul. And now there was no turning back. With a sigh, Zora forced herself to focus. She couldn't let her doubts consume her. Ilara needed her, and she had to keep her promise. She had promised to protect her sister no matter what the cost. That promise was everything now. Hours later, after Ilara had eaten a small portion of food and drifted off to sleep once more, Zora knew it was time to honor her end of the bargain. She left their shack and made her way to the square, where the trader's ship awaited her. The village was quieter now, the streets empty as most people had either left for the day or locked themselves inside, hiding from the harsh realities of their dying world. Zora's heart beat faster with each step she took. She had no idea what awaited her, but she knew she couldn't turn back now. When she arrived at the trader's ship, the sight of it sent a chill down her spine. It was massive, dark, and ominous. The ship's exterior was covered in rust and grime, but it still towered above her. She took a deep breath and approached the airlock, her footsteps echoing in the stillness. The moment she stepped inside, the temperature dropped, and the smell of metal and oil filled her nostrils. She shuddered but kept her head high, forcing herself to walk forward. The trader was waiting for her, standing near a large control panel, his arms crossed. His cold eyes flicked over her, but his expression remained unreadable. "Zora," he said, his voice as cold as ever, "I trust you had a peaceful night?" She nodded, though her stomach twisted with unease. I did, she said, her voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at her. I'm here to keep my promise. The trader chuckled darkly, the sound echoing off the walls of the ship. A promise made is a promise kept, he said, but don't think for 1 second that I've forgotten about our deal. You work for me now. You're mine to command. Zora swallowed hard but didn't speak. She had no choice but to follow his orders. For now. Your first task, the trader continued, is simple. I need you to unload the cargo in the hold. It's not the hardest work, but it's necessary. You will do this without question. Understood? Zora clenched her fists at her sides, but she nodded. Understood. The trader led her down a narrow hallway to a large, dimly lit room filled with crates, each marked with strange symbols. Some of them were glowing faintly, while others appeared to be locked with complex mechanisms. Zora was unsure of what was inside, but she could already feel the weight of the task ahead. She moved to the first crate, her hands shaking as she tried to lift it. The weight was more than she expected, and she nearly stumbled under its load. The trader watched her, a smug look on his face. You'll get used to it, he said with a cruel smile. In time, you'll be stronger, faster, or you won't last long. Zora gritted her teeth, forcing herself to continue. She wasn't weak. She had survived worse. But as the hours passed, her muscles ached and her mind began to spiral. She was nothing but a servant to this man, doing his bidding like a slave, and there was no one to save her. No one but herself. With every crate she moved, the weight of her decision pressed heavier on her chest, but there was still a small voice inside her that whispered, Ilara, you did this for her. Keep going. You have to. Days passed aboard the trader's ship, and each one felt like an eternity to Zora. She had spent countless hours unloading crates, moving heavy equipment, and doing menial tasks for the trader, but no matter how hard she worked, the emptiness in her chest never faded. The work was exhausting, and with each task she felt more and more like a shadow, just another tool to be used and discarded when no longer needed. The trader, whose name she had never bothered to learn, was cold and distant, only speaking to her when he needed something done. He was cruel in his silence, never offering praise or even a kind word. Zora had long since stopped asking questions. She knew better than to push too hard for answers. But in the quiet of the long nights, when her body was sore and her mind drifted, she couldn't stop wondering what he wanted from her. Was this truly all she was meant for? To serve him until her strength gave out? Ilara's face, pale and weak from illness, haunted her during every task. Zora knew she had done the right thing. She had saved her sister, but at what cost? Ilara was recovering slowly, but Zora could sense her sister's unease. The way Ilara would look at her when she returned from the ship, her eyes filled with confusion and fear. What had happened to the girl who once laughed with joy? What had Zora become? One evening, as Zora was cleaning a storage room on the ship, the trader called her to the bridge. His voice was colder than usual, more commanding, and Zora's stomach twisted at the thought of what he might want. When she entered the bridge, she was greeted by the trader's unflinching stare. His eyes, like ice, never wavered from her face, as he motioned for her to approach. I have a job for you, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. A special job, one that requires discretion. You'll go down to the marketplace on the nearest station and retrieve a package for me. It's of great importance. Zora's heart raced, the tension in her chest growing tighter. What's in the package? She asked, her voice betraying the fear that had begun to claw at her throat. The trader smirked, a cruel smile that sent a chill down her spine. That's not for you to know. Just bring it to me. Do it well, and you'll earn more food for your sister. Fail, and, well, there won't be any more deals to make. The warning was clear. She had no choice but to comply. With no further explanation, the trader handed Zora a small communication device and a bag of credits, the only currency they used. Go to the station, find the contact I've arranged, and get the package. No questions asked. Zora swallowed hard. This felt different, darker. But she didn't have the luxury of hesitation. The thought of her sister's fragile form waiting back at the shack, too weak to fend for herself, pushed her forward. Zora nodded silently, taking the device and the credits. The journey to the station was quick, but Zora's mind was clouded with questions she couldn't answer. The station was a hub for travelers, a crowded, noisy place full of merchants, traders, and smugglers. She had been to stations like this before, but today it felt different. Today she was no longer a simple traveler. She was a pawn in a game she didn't understand, sent to retrieve something she didn't know anything about. As Zora stepped off the transport, she looked around, her senses heightened. The air was thick with the scent of food, spices, and strange alien perfumes. But beneath the hustle and bustle of the crowd, there was a coldness, a tension in the air that made Zora feel like an outsider, like something more than just a visitor. She moved through the station carefully, looking for the contact the trader had mentioned. She didn't know what to expect, but she was on edge. Every shadow seemed to hide something, every whisper felt like a warning. It didn't take long to find the man. He was standing near an alleyway, dressed in dark clothing that blended into the shadows. He gave her a quick glance as she approached, then motioned for her to follow him into the alley. Zora hesitated for only a moment before following him. She had no choice. She had to finish this and return to Ilara. The man spoke in a low voice. "I was told to give you the package." He handed her a small metallic box. It was plain, unmarked, and weighed heavily in her hands. Zora took it, quickly, not asking questions. Her heart was pounding as she turned to leave, but the man stopped her. "You don't know what you're carrying, do you?" he asked, his voice filled with a strange, knowing tone. Zora's breath caught. "I don't care," she replied quickly. "I just need to get back." The man didn't seem convinced. He gave her a long look before nodding. "You'll regret this," he muttered. Zora didn't answer. She didn't have time to entertain his cryptic words. She turned and walked quickly back toward the transport station, the box still heavy in her hands. As she boarded the transport, Zora's mind raced. What had the trader wanted with whatever was in the box? What did it mean for her sister? She didn't know, but she knew she had to get back to the ship. If she could complete this task, she would finally have some leverage. She could demand better treatment for Ilara, maybe even free herself from the trader's cruel grip. But deep down, she knew that this task had changed things. Zora was no longer just a servant. She was now a part of something far darker than she had ever imagined. And soon, she would have to face the truth of what the trader had truly wanted all along. Zora's heart thudded in her chest as the transport made its way back to the trader's ship. The package she had retrieved was now in her hands, but her mind was in turmoil. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that she had just crossed a line she couldn't return from. The man at the station had warned her, "You'll regret this." His words echoed in her mind like a dark omen, a warning she hadn't fully understood until now. The metallic box in her hands felt heavier than it should have. She had no idea what was inside, but the trader had made it clear that she wasn't to ask questions. Still, Zora couldn't help but wonder why the trader, a man so focused on control, had entrusted her with such a task. She wasn't a fighter, just a desperate girl trying to save her sister. But somehow, she had become entangled in something much bigger than herself. As the transport docked with the ship, Zora's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the airlock sealing shut behind her. The trader stood at the entrance waiting for her. His cold eyes immediately fell on the box she carried, and his lips curled into a small, approving smile. "You've done well," he said, his voice devoid of warmth. "You brought it back, quickly. I expected no less from you." Zora didn't speak. Her mind was still racing, her body tense from the weight of the task she had completed. She didn't know what to expect next, but something in the way the trader spoke, the way he looked at her, made her skin crawl. "Come," he said, motioning for her to follow. "You've earned your reward. This is your chance to prove your worth." Zora nodded, her throat dry. She followed him through the narrow corridors of the ship, the sound of her footsteps muffled by the thick metal walls. She had grown used to the ship's cold, sterile environment. But today it felt different. Every corner seemed to hide a secret. Every shadow stretched just a little too far. They arrived at the trader's private quarters. Zora had never been inside before, and she hesitated for a moment before stepping over the threshold. The room was dimly lit, its walls lined with shelves filled with strange artifacts and unmarked crates. The only window in the room looked out into the endless void of space, a reminder that there was no escape from the ship. The trader gestured for her to place the box on the table in the center of the room. His fingers were steady as he opened it, revealing a small glowing device inside. It was unlike anything Zora had ever seen before, smooth, metallic, and humming with an energy that seemed almost alive. The device pulsed with a soft blue light, and Zora could feel its power radiating from it, a force that sent a shiver down her spine. The trader picked it up carefully, inspecting it as though it were the most valuable thing in the universe. "This," he said, his voice low, "is the key to everything." Zora's heart skipped a beat. "The key to what?" she asked before she could stop herself. The trader's eyes flicked to her, his expression unreadable. "You're curious now," he said, almost with amusement. "It's not for you to know just yet. But what you need to understand is that this device has the power to change everything. It can give me what I need to bring order to the galaxy. And you, Zora, are a part of that." Zora's stomach twisted. "What do you mean? What are you planning to do with it?" The trader paused, then gave her a small, dangerous smile. "Control," he said simply. "With this device, I will control everything. The galaxy, the trade routes, the planets, and even your precious world of Lycos, everything will be mine." Zora's breath caught in her throat. You're using me to get this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The trader's smile never faltered. "Not just you. You've been a useful tool, Zora. But this device isn't just for me. It's for someone much bigger than you, someone who will pay handsomely for it." Zora's mind raced. She had no idea what the trader was talking about. But she knew that the galaxy wasn't just going to fall into his hands without resistance. There had to be others. People who would fight back, who would try to stop him. But where did that leave her? She was nothing but a pawn. A desperate girl willing to do anything for her sister's survival. And now, she had unwittingly played a part in something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. "What happens to me now?" Zora asked, her voice barely audible. The trader's smile widened, but it wasn't a kind smile. "Now," he said, "you fulfill your part. You've done well so far, but the real work is just beginning. You're going to help me use this device. You're going to help me bring the galaxy to its knees." Zora's stomach churned. She had known this day would come. The day when she could no longer pretend to be just a simple girl. But the reality of it was worse than she had imagined. She wasn't just a servant. She wasn't even an ally. She was a tool, nothing more, nothing less. As the trader turned to leave, Zora felt a sharp pang of guilt in her chest. She had made a terrible choice. Her sister's life had come at the cost of her own. There was no turning back now, but there had to be a way out. She couldn't let the trader win. She couldn't let the galaxy fall under his control. There was something inside Zora, something that refused to be crushed even now. She might be trapped on this ship, caught in a web of lies and deceit, but she wouldn't give up. Not yet. She would find a way to stop him, to save her sister, to free herself from the trader's cruel grip. And maybe, just maybe, she could still be the one to change the galaxy. Zora sat in the dim corner of the trader's ship, her hands clenched tightly into fists. The metallic box had been delivered, its purpose now clearer than ever. It was a weapon, a tool for unimaginable power. The trader had plans for it, plans that would rip through the fabric of the galaxy itself. She was a small piece of this dangerous game, but her role was becoming more clear, and it terrified her. The task she had been assigned now felt heavier. The trader had been explicit. "You'll help me use this device." But Zora didn't know how. The device was far beyond anything her people could understand, and yet the trader wanted her involved in its activation. The thought of being so close to such power left a bitter taste in her mouth. She had never wanted this. All she had ever wanted was to save Ilara. But now, everything was tangled up in lies, deals, and dark promises. Zora spent her days working tirelessly, moving crates, following orders, keeping to the routine. It had become a blur of empty motions, each one harder than the last. But with every task, her resolve to protect Ilara only grew stronger. Her sister was safe for now. But Zora wasn't sure how much longer that would last. The trader had promised her more food for Ilara, but Zora knew that it came at a cost. The more she helped the trader, the more she feared what would come next. She had watched him speak with shadowy figures in the back of the ship, figures whose eyes seemed to burn with hunger. These weren't ordinary traders. These were men and women who trafficked in power, who lived for control. And Zora, despite everything, was caught in their web. One day, as Zora walked down a narrow corridor to gather supplies, she caught sight of something that stopped her in her tracks. A familiar face stood in front of her. Ilara. Ilara wasn't supposed to be on the ship. She should have been resting in their small quarters, safe from the dangers surrounding them. But here she was, standing alone in the hall, her eyes wide and confused. "Ilara!" Zora exclaimed, rushing over to her. "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be out of our quarters." Ilara looked up at her sister, her face pale, but her eyes were full of a quiet determination. "I couldn't stay there anymore," she whispered, glancing around nervously. "Zora, I overheard something. I heard them talking." Zora felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "What did you hear?" she asked, her voice trembling. Ilara took a deep breath. "I heard the trader talking about you, about how he's using you. He's not planning to stop with just the galaxy. He wants more. He wants you to activate the device, Zora. You're his key." Zora's blood ran cold. She had always feared that the traitor was using her, but to hear Ilara speak those words made it all too real. She could feel the walls closing in around her. "Ilara, you shouldn't have heard that," Zora said, her voice strained. "It's too dangerous. You need to go back to our room and stay hidden." Ilara shook her head. "No, Zora. I need you to stop this. We can't just let him control us. There's always been more to this than just survival. There's a choice, Zora. A choice you have to make." Zora felt a flicker of hope in her chest, but it was quickly smothered by the weight of the truth. She couldn't let Ilara get caught in this. She couldn't let her sister see the darkness that was now part of their lives. The traitor had control over them, but how much longer could they bear it? "I don't have a choice, Ilara," Zora whispered, her voice breaking. "I made a deal. I promised to do whatever he wanted. If I don't, we both—" "No, Zora," Ilara interrupted, her voice firm. "You can still stop this. You're not bound by his words. You're more than this. Don't let him turn you into a weapon. You have the power to fight back." Zora's heart pounded in her chest. What Ilara was saying made sense. She had always believed that there had to be another way out, another way to survive. But the traitor's hold on her was tightening, and the more she worked, the more impossible it seemed to break free. But Ilara was right. There was always a choice. Zora pulled Ilara into an embrace, holding her tightly. "I won't let you down, Ilara," she whispered. "I won't let this monster win." But deep down, she didn't know if she could stop what was coming. The traitor had plans that were beyond her understanding, and her involvement in them was only going to deepen. He had manipulated her with promises of food and safety for Ilara, but at what cost? That night, Zora lay awake in the cold, dark room that she and Ilara shared. The quiet hum of the ship's engines filled the silence, but Zora couldn't quiet the thoughts in her mind. She had never felt more trapped. The traitor's demands had grown stronger, more insistent. Each time Zora completed a task, he gave her a new one. But with every new task, the pressure mounted. She was running out of time to make a choice. The device, the key to the galaxy, was still on the table in the traitor's private room. It hummed with an eerie glow, its power beckoning. Zora had seen the way it affected the traitor, the hunger in his eyes whenever he looked at it. And for the first time, she understood why he had chosen her. She was the key to unlocking its power, and once it was unlocked, there would be no stopping the darkness that would follow. But Zora knew now that she had a choice. She could continue to be his puppet, a tool to be used at his whim, or she could fight back. The path was dangerous, uncertain, but she couldn't keep going down the road the traitor had set for her. She couldn't let him control her fate. With a deep breath, Zora made a silent vow to herself. Tomorrow things would change. She didn't know how, and she didn't know when, but she would take control of her own destiny, for Ilara, for her people, for herself. Zora woke up in a cold sweat, the sharp hum of the ship's engines vibrating through her bones. The dark room was silent, save for the sound of her breathing. She had only closed her eyes for a few hours, but sleep had brought no peace. Her mind was still racing with thoughts of the traitor, the device, and the power he sought to wield. She looked over at Ilara, who was still asleep, her face peaceful for the first time in days. Zora felt a pang of guilt. She had promised her sister that everything would be all right, but the more she worked for the traitor, the more she felt like she was sinking deeper into a nightmare she couldn't escape. Ilara deserved more than this. She deserved safety, warmth, and a future. Zora had given her a future once, but now she wasn't so sure anymore. The traitor had kept her busy with tasks every day, loading, unloading, cleaning, and moving supplies. It was grueling work, and every time Zora thought she might be close to understanding the traitor's true intentions, he would throw another task her way, forcing her to focus on the mundane instead of the bigger picture. But she had been paying attention, learning in the quiet moments when she could steal a glance at the mysterious device, trying to figure out what made it so special. It was more than just a weapon. The traitor had been clear about that. This device is the key to control. But control over what? Over whom? Zora couldn't shake the feeling that she was being used as a pawn in a much larger game, and every task she completed, every deal she helped make, only pulled her deeper into the web. The thought of her sister, safe for now but growing more suspicious with every passing day, made Zora's stomach churn. She couldn't keep going like this. She couldn't keep sacrificing her own soul for a fleeting illusion of safety. It wasn't until that evening, when the traitor summoned her to his private quarters again, that everything finally started to unravel. He was standing by the control panel, the device still on the table. It pulsed with an eerie light, as though alive, almost as if it were beckoning her to come closer. "Zora," the traitor called, his voice cold and sharp. "Come here." Zora approached slowly, her heart hammering in her chest. She had been expecting this moment. Every day that she spent working on this ship felt like another step closer to a breaking point, and now she could feel that she was standing on the edge of something irreversible. "I have a task for you," the traitor said, his eyes scanning, her face as though he were looking for something. "It's time to begin using the device. You've proven yourself useful, and now you will help me fulfill my plan." Zora's heart sank. The device, the key to control. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. She knew what he would say, but hearing the words aloud made the situation feel even more real. The traitor smirked, his cold eyes glinting with a dark satisfaction. "You'll activate it," he said simply, "and you will help me take control of the galaxy. It starts with this ship, then the system, and then everything." Zora swallowed hard, her mind whirling. She had expected this, but now that it was happening, she felt the weight of her decision crushing down on her. The traitor had been using her all along, first for food, then for labor, and now for something far worse. She had unknowingly become the key to his dark empire. She had been a part of this plan from the moment she agreed to help him, but she couldn't let it go any further. Zora's eyes flicked to the device on the table. The traitor stood beside it, his hand hovering over the activation switch. He was so close to his goal, and Zora realized that she had one final chance to stop him. She stepped forward, her hands trembling, and picked up the device. It was lighter than she expected, the metal smooth beneath her fingertips. As soon as she touched it, The soft hum grew louder, more insistent as if it were reacting to her presence. The traitor's gaze never left her, his face a mask of anticipation. But something within Zora shifted. She felt it in her chest, a spark of defiance, a glimmer of hope that had been buried beneath the weight of her fear. The traitor was trying to control her. He wanted her to be the one to activate the device to bring his plans to fruition. But she couldn't let that happen. Not now. Not after everything she had been through. The thought of Ilara, of her innocent sister who still didn't fully understand the danger they were in, pushed Zora forward. She would do whatever it took to protect her, even if it meant going against everything she had promised, even if it meant risking her own life to stop the traitor's evil plans. Zora gripped the device tightly, feeling the pulsing energy surge through her. She turned to face the traitor, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to rise within her. "I'm not doing this." The traitor's eyes narrowed, his smile faltering for the first time. "You have no choice, Zora," he sneered. "You were born for this. The device will not work unless you activate it. You are the key." Zora shook her head, her fingers still wrapped around the device. She knew it was her last chance to take control of her own fate. "I will never be your puppet," she said, her voice rising. "You want power? Then take it, but not from me." Before the traitor could respond, Zora turned and ran toward the nearest console, the device still clutched in her hands. She had no plan, no clear path, but she knew one thing. She couldn't let this happen. With a sharp motion, Zora slammed the device into the console, forcing the power to surge through the system. The entire ship shook as the device activated, sending a wave of energy through the ship's core. The traitor's furious scream echoed through the hallways, but it was too late. Zora had taken the first step in her rebellion, and now there was no going back. The ship trembled beneath Zora's feet as the energy from the device surged through the walls. The lights flickered, then stabilized. For a moment, everything was still, as if the ship itself had taken a breath. Zora stood there, her heart pounding in her chest, the weight of her actions settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had justified the traitor. She had just set something into motion that would either free her or destroy her entirely. The traitor's furious voice broke the silence. "What have you done?" he shouted, his words seething with anger. Zora could hear him coming toward her, but she didn't move. She couldn't. The traitor had always controlled her with fear, with promises, with threats, but not anymore. Now it was her turn to act. "I stopped you," Zora said, her voice steady but filled with determination. "This is over." The traitor reached her in an instant, his eyes wild with rage. "You think you can stop me? You think you can control the device? You have no idea what you've done, girl. You've doomed yourself and worse, your sister." Zora's heart clenched at the mention of Ilara. She had done everything for her sister. Everything. But now, it seemed that the traitor was playing a deeper game than even she had imagined. She glanced at the console, the device now humming with power, and then back at the traitor. "You've been using me," Zora said, her voice shaking with the weight of the truth. "You never cared about me or Ilara. This was never about saving her. It was about using me as a tool to get what you wanted." The traitor's face twisted with anger, but there was something else there, something cold and calculating. "You're just another pawn. You always were. And now you've ruined everything." Zora took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. "I'm done being your pawn." The traitor scoffed. "You have no idea what you're up against. There are forces far beyond you, far beyond anything you could comprehend. This is just the beginning, Zora. You can't stop me." Zora felt a surge of power inside her. She wasn't just standing up to him for herself anymore. She was standing up for Ilara, for everyone who had been oppressed by people like the traitor. She could feel the energy from the device pulsing through her, filling her with a strength she had never known. "I don't need to stop you," Zora said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I just need to show you that you've underestimated me." In that moment, something changed. The air in the room felt different. The device on the console began to pulse faster, brighter, as if responding to Zora's defiance. The trader's eyes widened in shock, but before he could react, a deep vibration shook the ship. Zora turned toward the source of the energy. The walls of the ship were starting to bend, the metal warping as if the very structure of the vessel was being torn apart by the power unleashed. The trader took a step back, his face a mix of disbelief and fear. "No," he muttered, his voice barely audible over the rumbling of the ship. "This can't be happening." Zora felt the power within her grow stronger, the device connecting to her in ways she couldn't explain. It wasn't just a tool to control the galaxy anymore. It was a bridge between the trader's plans and her own. She had seized control, but it came with a price. The ship was reacting to the energy, and the consequences of her actions were quickly becoming clear. The trader began shouting, trying to disconnect the device, but the ship was beyond his control now. The walls were bending more violently, the floor groaning under the strain. Zora took a deep breath, her mind focused. She couldn't let the trader use this power for his own selfish desires. She had to end this, once and for all. She stepped toward the console, feeling the energy surge inside her, growing stronger with each step. The trader tried to stop her, but he was too weak, too distracted by the chaos unfolding around him. "Don't you see?" Zora said, her voice low but firm. "I'm not your servant anymore. I never was." With a final, forceful push, Zora activated the device. The energy that flowed from it was unlike anything she had ever felt, pure, raw, and unstoppable. The ship shook violently, its systems failing as the device overloaded with power. The trader's eyes were wide with horror as he realized what was happening. But it was too late. As the power reached its peak, the ship's walls began to crack, the structure giving way to the energy that had been unleashed. Zora knew the ship wouldn't last much longer, but she didn't care. She had made her choice. The trader collapsed to his knees, unable to stop the destruction he had set into motion. "What have you done?" he gasped, his voice full of disbelief and fear. Zora stood tall, her eyes unwavering. "I've stopped you," she said, her voice strong, "and I've freed myself." The ship was on the brink of collapse when Zora turned and rushed back to the quarters where Ilara was waiting. The chaos behind her seemed distant, the rumbling of the ship becoming muffled by the adrenaline coursing through her veins. She had done it. She had broken free. When she reached their room, she found Ilara awake, looking out the small window at the destruction outside. Her face lit up with relief when she saw Zora. "You did it," Ilara said, her voice full of awe. "You stopped him." Zora nodded, her heart swelling with pride. "Yes," she said softly, "but the fight isn't over. There's still more to do." Ilara smiled. "We'll face it together." As the ship began to break apart around them, Zora took Ilara's hand. She had no idea what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. They were free. The galaxy, the trader, the device, it was all behind them now. And for the first time in a long while, Zora felt a sense of hope. A new dawn was on the horizon, and this time, she would be the one to shape it.